Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. Luigi Mangione is just minutes away from being arraigned on federal charges. We're live in New York City with the very latest on the push from the federal government to seek the death penalty for the man accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO. And a live look inside St. Peter's Basilica, where people are paying their respects to Pope Francis. Public viewings are close to wrapping up ahead of his funeral tomorrow. We're going to break down what to expect. And when one senator didn't show up to a town hall, these voters had, well, an unusual solution for a stand-in on stage, a cardboard cutout.
Why do you keep voting for ignorant public health policies?
I say hands off our VA.
Hey. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania on their way to Rome there to attend tomorrow's funeral of Pope Francis in Vatican City. Before leaving, the president was asked about the state of negotiations on the war in Ukraine, and on the trade war with China. Here's what he had to say.
We have a lot of things going on, and I think in the end we're going to end up with a lot of good deals, including tariff deals and trade deals. We're going to make our country rich, but we're going to try and get out of war so that we can save 5,000 people a week. And that's what my aim is. I want to save 5,000 young men. They happen to be mostly Ukrainian, Russian. 5,000 young Ukrainian and Russian men. And that's a big honor if I can do it. I think we're pretty close.
Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. Aaron, wow, what a backdrop. You're in Rome for us ahead of the president's arrival there. Do we know if the president will be meeting with any world leaders also attending the Pope's funeral, possibly to talk about tariffs?
Liz, good to be with you. Yes, here in Rome, and in a couple of hours, President Trump will arrive around 11 p.m. tonight. But it's a really tight window that he will be here in Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis, less than 24 hours. But he has suggested throughout the week that he will do bilateral meetings of sorts with the many foreign leaders that are attending this funeral. And you've seen some of them already say that they want to talk to President Trump. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has told reporters he wants to discuss the ongoing war. Of course, President Trump has had the U.S. really involved in trying to speed up negotiations and peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. And the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has also told reporters that she wants to discuss tariffs with Trump. President Trump, of course, has made the EU a big gripe of his, quote, reciprocal tariffs. But again, all of these conversations are going to be happening on the sidelines of this funeral, which is the main reason that President Trump is coming here to Italy.
Leaning in more to tariffs there, Aaron, in his Time magazine interview, Trump also said that he spoke with Chinese President Xi Jinping, but the Chinese are denying that there are talks that are ongoing about tariffs. What can you tell us?
Yeah, this has been a dynamic we've seen play out throughout the week, where the U.S. is saying that there are active talks with Chinese officials in regards to trade and tariffs, and Chinese officials have responded saying essentially that that's fake news, that there are no ongoing negotiations between the two big global markets. President Trump, after that Time interview came out, was asked by reporters, when specifically did you talk to President Xi? President Trump responded essentially saying no comment, and a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said again today, after that Time interview piece came out, that there have been no negotiations yet between the U.S. and China. It seems like we're at where we were a couple weeks ago, where each country is kind of playing chicken with each other, trying to dare each other to make the first call. But so far, it's really unclear on if that has actually happened.
Yeah, we'll send it back to Europe there, Aaron. In that same interview with Time magazine, the president also said that Russian-occupied Crimea will stay part of Russia and not Ukraine. So how does that square with the president's confidence that a peace deal can be reached? I can imagine many European countries are concerned about that, and China also closely watching to see what happens with Crimea.
Yeah, I expect if Ukrainian President Zelensky gets to speak with President Trump tomorrow at this funeral, he will bring that up, that Russian control of Crimea has been a red line for Zelensky continuously throughout these negotiation talks. And you've seen President Trump kind of say that that's one of the concessions, imply that's one of the concessions Ukraine has to give. He also seemed to blame former President Obama for Russia's invasion of Crimea in the first place, but he has stressed wanting to get a deal done as soon as possible. It really seems to be muddled, of course, by his comments about Crimea just now.
I want to pivot for a moment to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Aaron, new developments in the mounting fallout from Signalgate. Earlier this week, we reported that Hegseth apparently included his wife, brother, and personal attorney in a chat about war plans on that messaging app. Now, sources tell CBS News that the Pentagon actually set up a direct line to Hegseth's office, which allowed him to connect to Signal and then bypass the usual security protocols. So is there any response from the White House on that?
Yeah, they haven't commented on that yet. Again, as throughout this week, where we've seen Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth really take a lot of criticism over his use of the Signal app, sharing potentially sensitive information about strikes in the Middle East. They have only stood behind him, saying they have full confidence in him. But just to talk a little bit more about that direct line, which essentially enabled Secretary Hegseth to use that Signal app on his laptop as well as on his phone. It was done in part through an aide in Hegseth's office, Marine Colonel Ricky Berea, who helped organize this effort as a way to kind of fix some internet connectivity issues, but certainly another sign that Hegseth is relying on the Signal app.
Aaron Navarro, live for us from Rome. Thank you so much, Aaron. Well, the big question that we've been covering this morning is, will his fourth trip to Russia be the charm for U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff to finally get a deal done between Russia and Ukraine? Now, the Kremlin characterizes today's meeting between Witkoff and Russian President Vladimir Putin as constructive and says, among other issues, the possibility of direct talks between Ukraine and Russia was discussed. But meanwhile, the violence continues on. A Russian general was killed in a car bombing just outside of Moscow. And this is the second type of attack on a top Russian military officer in just 4 months. In that case, Ukraine took responsibility. But in today's case, Russia's foreign minister calls this one a terrorist attack. Let's bring in Michael Borsacue, who's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Michael, thank you for joining us. The Kremlin says today's talks with the U.S. envoy were constructive, and the possibility of direct Russia-Ukraine talks was discussed in that. What's your take on that?
Well, a lot of moving balls in the air, I got to say, pretty head spinning. But yeah, it looks like the U.S. is moving very quickly, rather the Trump administration, to get a deal very quickly, because after all, Mr. Trump has had pretty much zero foreign affairs wins at the moment. But it's looking more and more that this proposed agreement will not be in Ukraine's favor. Yes, direct talks was one of the items discussed. Ukraine would do that very, very reluctantly. What Ukraine is saying is that Russia so far has shown no interest in peace. They're dragging everything out.
Yeah, and we're seeing violence really on both sides, Michael. Bombing in Ukraine, car bomb death of a Russian general. How can a deal get done in this kind of atmosphere, though?
Well, I think there was a glimmer of hope as of yesterday, but your partner, BBC, is reporting just a few minutes ago that Mr. Zelensky is having second thoughts about going to the Vatican. It was hoped that he might have some FaceTime with Mr. Trump. Instead, Mr. Zelensky is saying that he needs to attend military meetings. And, you know, it looks like this is becoming more and more important, because in his many absences from Ukraine, others are taking the microphone, including Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, who is a political opponent to Mr. Zelensky, saying that, yes, Ukraine may have to temporarily give up territory. That is a very, very big deal.
Yes, it is. I mean, as you mentioned, President Trump saying that Crimea should remain part of Russia. And Ukrainian President Zelensky has said no concessions to Russia until there's a ceasefire. Any signal of what those concessions could be, if not Crimea?
Well, it's hard to say, but I think two things are happening. Number one, Russia is very much ratcheting up its bombing of Ukrainian cities and villages, keeping a very robust presence on the front line, of course. So they're trying to grab as much territory as possible, inflict as much damage on Mr. Zelensky as possible. and at the same time grab as many concessions as possible from the U.S., everything from lifting of sanctions, unfreezing of frozen assets. One more thing, again, about that pressure ratcheting up on Mr. Zelensky. This is a little bit of a controversial thing to say, but I'll say it anyway, is that it looks like the time may come soon for Mr. Zelensky to call for full mobilization in Ukraine. There's a lot of tired men of advanced age on the front line. They need to be refreshed. And if U.S. security is going to be pulled back, Ukraine needs a much more robust presence on the front line.
I want to ask you once again about Crimea, though. I mean, what is the rest of Europe thinking about this? There has to be concern from neighboring countries there, and then also China watching closely to see what happens with this potential ceasefire agreement.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very, very bad precedent. And above everything else, it sends such a horrible signal to dictators around the world to grab territory. And yeah, especially China. Mr. Xi Jinping is calculating as we speak, I'm sure, about when to invade or reclaim Taiwan. They're making preparatory steps from what we see from satellite photographs and other actions. It's something that is a complete betrayal of the values we've come to know of America, those held by Republicans such as Bush and Reagan and so on. It's a sad moment for the world right now if that were to happen.
Michael Borsacute, thank you so much for your insights. All right, switching gears to take a live look at the big board today. Stocks are on a bit of a 4-day win streak here, despite trade talks remaining in limbo between the U.S. and China. President Trump says he has spoken with Chinese President Xi Jinping, quote, numerous times on tariffs, but was pretty vague about what if he has spoken with him since the trade war actually broke out. Trump told Time magazine that the Chinese president called him and that the U.S. and China are in trade talks. Beijing has denied any negotiations are underway and has called for abolishing unilateral tariffs. Let's turn now to CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady, who is reporting to us from the New York Stock Exchange. Kelly, where do things stand now with China and the U.S.?
So each have those over 100% tariffs on either country, 145% that the U.S. has on China, 125% that China has on the U.S. But we started to see some ratcheting up tit for tat of some non-tariff ways to sort of retaliate against the other country. Just yesterday or overnight, China canceled a shipment of pork that they were getting from the U.S. This is the third largest market for U.S. farmers when it comes to pork. So it's kind of an example, along with those Boeing planes that you and I have discussed before, of that ratcheting up. It does seem that we're hearing one thing from one side, one thing from another, and it's changing minute by minute. Liz, before I sort of hopped on the air today, I talked with some of the traders down there, and I asked them, how are you feeling? I mean, we're seeing such a rally, a good week for the markets, this back and forth between China, and a lot of them said, look, we're sort of in wait and see mode, and we're just reacting to every little bit of trickle of information. That's why you've seen things be so volatile, pretty much 1 hour from another. We're pretty stable right now in the markets, but they're really looking for some concrete trade deals or evidence of actual negotiation talks instead of one side says this, one side says this, Liz.
Yeah, traders not sure what's going to happen. Also consumers. In fact, we have some new consumer sentiment data. What is it telling you? It's not good, but it could have been worse, which I think is some sort of heartening news. And the reason it is better is this particular window of consumers that were surveyed includes when the White House paused those reciprocal tariffs going back to April 9th. And so we expected consumer sentiment to be worse. It seems to have gotten a little bit of a buoy, but it's still down 8% versus last month. The index showed a reading of 52.2. Basically, what you need to know is anything under 100 means that consumers feel negative about the economy, the labor market, and their financial situation. So pretty big gap from 100. The other element that I wanted to note is if you go back to January, in terms of the expectations part of this survey, it's how consumers think things are going to be over the next year. We have seen a 32% drop since the president took office. So overall, folks are not feeling good about things, especially because of the worries about tariffs and inflation. Those words featured a lot in this report, as you would expect. But consumer sentiment doesn't always translate into consumer spending.
that's really where we're going to be looking, Liz, if this concern translates into folks pulling back.
Okay, so let's end on this Friday with a high note. Stocks are on somewhat of a 4-day winning streak. What do you think has led the charge?
Two things. We got some good earnings reports this week, especially Alphabet and Google last night was a sort of a strong one. And we also just saw some restraint from the White House, that shift in tone, that there could be a de-escalation. That was what markets wanted to hear. But on a Friday, anything can happen. And of course, Liz, these things change minute by minute. And we're also looking ahead to next week when we have a jobs report, which could move the markets.
Okay, should be interesting. Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. All right, we're also following some breaking news out of New York, where former Congressman George Santos was just sentenced for wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. Well, the very latest. Stay with us right here on CBS News 24/7. Let's take you now to New York, where Luigi Mangione is set to be arraigned on federal charges any moment now. Federal prosecutors filed a formal notice of intent to seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione, the man accused of stalking and killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson back in December. Let's get right to CBS News senior coordinating producer Anna Schechter for more on this case. And I want to first talk about the pursuit for the death penalty. How are prosecutors arguing for it?
Well, they lay out multiple reasons. Of course, under the federal statute, if someone is accused and convicted of murder, that can carry the death penalty. It's just that under the Biden administration and previous administrations, they just did not. And President Trump has issued his directive that in any case where it could be sought, that the Department of Justice should seek it. His Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has spoken about the issue over the last couple of months, but it wasn't until last night around 8 p.m. that federal prosecutors from the Southern District of New York filed this official notice of intent to seek the death penalty. It was interesting. They lay out a multitude of reasons, but there you see he took steps to evade law enforcement, prosecutors said, flee New York City immediately after the murder, and cross state lines while armed with a privately manufactured firearm and silencer. So they're essentially kind of telling this narrative, reminding the judge of exactly what Mangione did, reminding the judge of this 5-day manhunt and that video that allegedly shows him pulling the trigger in cold blood. But they also talked about victims who are impacted, his family. Of course, Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, who was targeted allegedly by Mangione, had a wife and 2 children. And so they are leaning into that, but they also say, and I thought this was really interesting, they lean into his desire to get the public to be angry about a specific industry, that being the healthcare industry. And of course, our viewers know the killing of Brian Thompson was a cultural touch point that sparked rage across the country, coast to coast, really around the world, over the cost of healthcare and versus the profits that these big corporations pull in. And there you see Brian Thompson's picture. I think it is important to remember that a man died. This is not just about the broader healthcare system, but this is a man whose family is now without a husband, father, and of course extended family as well are affected by this. I think for our viewers, some people would be surprised to learn that more than 50% of Americans do support the death penalty. It's about 54% according to latest polling, which is down from previous years, and younger people are less and less inclined to support the death penalty. So this case touches upon so many things, including sort of we as a society, are we going to continue doing this? And under President Trump, the Department of Justice has been directed to pursue the death penalty in cases such as this.
Yeah, I want to talk about the public perception of all of this and how it's going to relate to eventually the case in just a moment. But first, it's worth noting that Mangione pled not guilty to his New York State charges already. Can we expect the same for his federal charges today?
It's a great question. That arraignment is underway as we're talking right this moment, Liz, and I do expect him to use his own voice, lean into the microphone, and once that judge has read him those 4 counts that he faces, to ask him, do you understand the charges? I expect him to say yes, and to enter a plea of not guilty. His lawyers have given every indication that they are going to fight this. In an April 1st statement, the most recent on-record statement from Karen Agnifilo, she called the seeking of the death penalty barbaric and state-sponsored murder. So his legal team is really leaning into the public support that Mangione has garnered, despite the allegations of this brutal killing.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned earlier, Luigi's case garnered a lot of attention across the world and, of course, in this country. And his lawyer is arguing that his case has been politicized. So how is that going to impact both his state and federal trial? I mean, can you get a fair jury?
It's a really good question. He's going to be tried here in the state of New York. And let me tell you, down at court, whether it's been for the state case or likely today at the federal case, you have dozens of people coming, supporting him. But listen, you just need a small group of jurors. This is not like hundreds of people, right? You need to fill a jury pool with people not just politically leaning to the left or right, but somebody who can look at the facts and apply the facts of the case to the law and to the job of being a juror. So they're going to be very careful in this case to be very selective in their jury selection process. So let's remind everybody, this is a long process. We are right now are just at the very beginning of it. This is his arraignment. He just enters the plea. There are going to be months of work on this. Jury selection takes time, but it does appear that he will take this to trial. His lawyers are going to fight this with everything that they've got, and they are even collecting donations from the public. They have set up a website. This is so unusual. I've never seen anything like this in my years of covering cases like this. There's an informational website where you can get information about how to send Mangione books or letters. How can you tell if he's actually received it? And they've even posted pictures of a yellow legal notepad where Mangione has apparently noted who he's received letters from and which ones he's read so far. So they are really leaning into this. When I say they, I mean his legal team. Do I think that they're going to be able to get a fair jury? They're going to have to, and they will take their time to ensure that. Right now, it looks like the federal case will go first and take precedence. That wasn't the case back in December, where then prosecutor for the Southern District, Damian Williams, said that Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's case would go first. Once Trump took office, Damian Williams left. We have a new set of people running the Southern District of New York, and it appears that that federal case will go first.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what a judge has to say about those websites by Mangione's lawyers. All right, CBS News senior coordinating producer Anna Schechter, thank you so much. All right, we're following breaking news in another case. Former Congressman George Santos walked out of a New York City courtroom after a judge hounded down his sentence. 87 months behind bars, or a bit more than 7 years in prison for wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. Last summer, Santos pleaded guilty to the charges and admitted to deceiving donors and stealing the identities of almost a dozen people in order to fund his congressional campaign. Our partners at CBS News New York are on top of this story. Let's listen into their coverage from just moments ago.
Good afternoon. We're outside Central Islip Federal Court, where we just heard from the prosecutors involved in the George Santos case. A victory lap of sorts, but also a warning. Their hope that his 87-month sentence in federal prison will send a message. We heard from the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District. We heard from the FBI, from the IRS, and from the Nassau County District Attorney. This was a combined effort over a couple of years, and in the end, they found George Santos had committed 5 different criminal schemes. But first, let me just give you the lay of the land here a little bit so you see what's going on. A tremendous amount of news media as this is the culmination of a case that, of course, made headlines across the nation, one of the most bizarre cases in congressional history. George Santos lied his way into Congress, and today he learned the cost of those lies will be 87 months in prison. It's more than 7 years, 7 1/3 years. It's the full sentence recommended by prosecutors who said that anything short of that would not capture the depth of his deceptions. He was a professional fraudster, they said, and he arrived this morning and left without any comment to reporters, not his usual colorful self, usually a little snarky as he walks in and out of court. None of that. He was very somber, glum. He had eyes were red. It looked like he had been crying. And in court, actually, there were tears as he addressed the judge. And I'll read a little bit to you of what he told the judge. He read from notes. He had also written to the judge, but this was really stated through tears. He said that he is humbled. He has shattered the faith of so many. He takes full responsibility. He betrayed his supporters and the institutions that he was sworn to serve. He said that he cannot rewrite the past, but he did ask for a balanced sentence. And he had called the 7-year proposed sentence at that point absurd. He said he can still contribute positively to the community that he wronged. But the judge, Joanna Seibert, was having none of it. She essentially threw the book at Santos, essentially disregarding or dismissing his argument that he was not the leader of any of these crime schemes. He, in fact, blamed it on Nancy Marks, who had also been charged with criminal conduct and has pled guilty, to his campaign treasurer, that he, in fact, was not the leader. She was. In the end, the judge sided with the prosecution, that it was his campaign, he was the leader, and sentenced him to 87 months in federal prison. He will have to turn himself in July, so he has now several months to get his affairs in order. It was also revealed in court today that he has made hundreds of thousands of dollars through cameo appearances, more than $300,000. He's also made $200,000 in selling his rights to his life story to a documentary, but that he's paid none of that back to his victims in restitution yet. The government said that he has 21 people are direct victims of his fraud, including some seniors and people with dementia who he stole credit card information from. He has 21 victims, but they said that the largest victims are members of the public who he defrauded. And there are many members here of New York 3, the congressional district, and they said that they were grateful to prosecutors for bringing this to justice.
And you were just watching our partners there at CBS News New York. Let's bring in our Department of Justice correspondent, Scott MacFarlane, who has been following this story since the very beginning. Scott, Santos almost got the maximum punishment here. Was this a surprise? What are prosecutors and the defense saying?
George Santos made life harder on himself at every step of his congressional career, brief one that it was, and his criminal case. He was asking for the minimum in this case, 2 years. That's the mandatory minimum for an ID theft and a fraud case. But he was just dunking on the Department of Justice in a tirade of social media posts on the eve of the sentencing, which the Department of Justice alerted the court to. And they argued that runs counter to this claim of remorse, to this request for leniency, to be so defiant and to be trying to walk back your culpability for a crime to which you've pleaded guilty. Just the way George Santos rankled his colleagues in Congress, poking them in the eye politically, almost begging for them to expel him, which they did. He kind of thumbed his hand in the eye of the judge, the court system here today. No surprise. No surprise from anybody involved. He got what the Department of Justice was seeking, a high-end sentence of 7+ years. When he spoke to my colleague Michael Kaplan today, George Santos said he was resigned to a long prison term.
And Scott, you're keeping an eye on another case. Federal authorities arrested a Milwaukee County judge under investigation of allegedly obstructing the arrest of an undocumented immigrant. What are the new developments here?
This is quite a different case. Hannah Duggan is a recently elected state judge in Milwaukee. According to prosecutors and according to the FBI, who arrested Duggan today at the courthouse in Milwaukee, She obstructed federal agents who were there outside her court to arrest a defendant who was appearing in her courtroom a week ago today, somebody who was suspected of being an undocumented immigrant for whom the Immigration and Customs Enforcement had paperwork to arrest and bring off site. According to the charging documents, Hannah Duggan sent those agents to the chief judge's office in the courthouse, and while those agents were headed to the boss's office, they allege she rerouted the person they were there to arrest to a jury box seat, then out a private jury entrance to the courthouse, allowing him, this person they were seeking to detain, to actually get outside before a foot chase ensued and the agents were able to arrest him and detain him. The feds are alleging the judge here was obstructing them deliberately, circumventing their authorities. She was processed today at the federal courthouse down the road in Milwaukee. She's had a booking photo taken. She was detained in her room for a couple of hours, and she will be back in that court May 15th facing a federal charge of obstruction for an arraignment and a plea of not guilty or guilty to be entered. This is a distinctive case. You see that social media post from the FBI's new director, Kash Patel, touting the arrest of Judge Hannah Duggan. I expect them to, at the Department of Justice, to try to amplify this arrest through interviews and media through the weekend.
All right, Scott McFarland, thank you so much. All right, coming up, we're seeing some breaking news out of Los Angeles where a police chase in the Hollywood Hills turns into a standoff. Well, the very latest right here on CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. You're looking at a live picture from St. Peter's Basilica. Public viewing of Pope Francis's body has just ended after 3 days. The Vatican says around 250,000 mourners filed through St. Peter's Basilica over the last few days to pay their last respects. So let's give you a look at the layout of what's in store for public viewing that took place here inside the Basilica. That ended today, and tomorrow, church and world leaders will gather at St. Peter's for the funeral Mass for Pope Francis. And interesting, in a break with recent tradition, the Pope will not be buried at the Vatican. Instead, he asked to be buried at the Basilica of St. Mary Major across the city in Rome. Then, 15 to 20 days after the Pope's death, per tradition, the cardinal electors will gather here at the Sistine Chapel for the conclave. The cardinals will be sealed off from the rest of the world to start the process of selecting the next pope by casting secret ballots until a new pope is chosen. Now, with much of tomorrow's funeral ceremony taking place outside, a huge security operation is unfolding right now. Snipers will be stationed on rooftops, drone detecting technology also in place. Around 8,000 security forces will be patrolling the streets. The Vatican says more than 100 foreign dignitaries are expected to be there, and that includes President Trump. Here he is, along with First Lady Melania, departing Joint Base Andrews, now on their way to Rome to attend Pope Francis's funeral. Let's bring in CBS News Papal and Vatican contributor Monsignor Anthony Figueiredo. He joins us live from Rome. Thank you so much for being with us, sir. What's the scene been like today on this final day of public viewing?
Well, it's been dramatic, tinged with sadness. We are losing a holy father. So in many ways, we feel like orphans. In just 20 minutes, the casket will be closed. It's a very moving ceremony because a white silk veil is placed over the Holy Father's face, in the sense that when he awakes, he'll awake to the sight of God. And in the coffin, some coins minted from his papacy will be placed in the coffin, sealed and also placed in Pope Francis's coffin. So for us, it's the end of really a family member. As we move to the funeral tomorrow morning and the burial at St. Mary Major, a break in tradition. Pope Francis loved that church. It's dedicated to the Virgin Mary. He stopped there before and after every apostolic trip. He took a detour when he came out of hospital after 5 weeks of suffering to pray before the Virgin Mary there. And exactly there, Pope Francis will be laid to rest.
Monsignor Anthony Figueiredo, live for us from Rome. Thank you so much for your insight. All right, we are following some breaking news out of Southern California, where a police chase in the Hollywood Hills turned into a standoff. Our partners at CBS News Los Angeles are following this story for us. Let's listen into their coverage from just moments ago.
And this did begin, we believe, at Hollywood and Highland. This truck was involved in some type of misdemeanor accident and then led officers on a pursuit. We want to remind everyone that you are watching KCAL News, the 10 at 10. We are watching this pursuit unfold here, and we are watching as the driver of this silver pickup truck, a Toyota Tacoma, that is pinned into this area between that shrub and with those cruisers right behind it. This person, again, involved in a misdemeanor hit and run, took off, was going at extremely slow speeds.
Yeah,
and,
so slow.
Yeah, officers tried to do a pit maneuver. That didn't work. They also used 2 spike strips. We're also showing you the traffic that is now being turned around on Coldwater.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it started out as pursuit. Now it's a standoff. So who knows how long this could be. But you've got all this traffic coming from both sides, trying to head into the valley and then trying to head onto the west side, and only to be met with more traffic. But you got authorities on both sides probably telling people, you know, to stay away. But they're going to need some traffic officers out here because there's, you know, it could be dangerous because these roads are very narrow,
right there too,
and there's not a lot of room to do U-turns.
Yeah.
And if they're going to try to do that, it's going to take some patience, but also it could be dangerous.
Yeah, definitely, because some parts of this roadway,
video.
Yeah, we're showing you there on the right side of your screen where this pursuit ended, right there at that hedge there. And you see at the beginning, it wasn't up against the hedge, but then they did kind of pin it in, and the driver went forward a bit, and then we saw the tires start to spin backwards. Clearly, this driver was trying to back into those cruisers, but had nowhere to go at this point.
Yeah, you could tell it's a pretty heavy truck, though, because even when they tried the pit maneuver twice, it barely moved.
Yeah,
you know,
it's hard when it's going really slow. The pit maneuvers are meant for a vehicle that's going a little faster, Mark.
Yeah, there's an optimal speed that LAPD likes to see. It's somewhere, I believe, around 35 miles an hour. I'm going to have to check my notes on that. Too slow. It's not.
You're watching our partners here at CBS News Los Angeles covering this chase and eventual standoff for this hit-and-run suspect in LAPD. This whole thing started at Hollywood and Highland, which is a pretty famous intersection there in the Hollywood area, and then led into the Hollywood Hills. And you can see there very windy, narrow streets. So officers and the suspect going around those different corners, suspect trying to turn around. You can see the officers did hit the car at one point, and now there is a standoff going on in the Hollywood area. We're going to stay on top of that. All right, coming up, we're also hearing of a plea in the Luigi Mangione case in New York. Stay with us. We'll have much more right here on CBS News 24/7. All right, we're following some breaking news. Luigi Mangione pleaded not guilty to a federal murder charge in the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. This is prosecutors formally declared their intent to seek the death penalty against him. Mangione, who's 26 years old, stood with his lawyers as he entered that plea. Apparently, he leaned forward toward a microphone as the U.S. District Judge Margaret Garnett asked him clearly if he understood the indictment and the charges against him. Mangione simply said yes. Asked how he wished to plea, Luigi Mangione said simply, not guilty, and then sat down. We're going to be waiting for lawyers to come out and answer questions from reporters, and we're going to stay on top of this breaking news story. Once again, Luigi Mangione pleads not guilty to federal murder charge in a New York City courtroom there. Meanwhile, a landmark education bill just passed the state of Texas, and it allows public money to pay for private school tuition. The $1 billion bill is being touted by many as a school choice victory. Let's get right to CBS News national reporter Karen Hua. Karen, thank you for being with us. Can you explain how exactly taxpayer money would be allocated to private schools?
Hey Liz, yeah, good to be with you. So as part of this very controversial $1 billion bill, the plan is for students who attend private school to get $10,000 a year to go toward their education. Students with disabilities will get 3 times that, $30,000 a year to go toward their education, and students who are homeschooled are going to get $2,000 a year.
So I can imagine a lot of parents have a lot of opinions about this. What type of response are we hearing from the community there? Do they think this is fair to all students?
So it's a very divisive topic, Liz. So there are different opinions on both sides of the aisle. Many Republicans, including President Trump, are for this measure. They believe it prioritizes students with disabilities and low-income students. However, many Democratic families, a lot of Democratic leaders believe that this is actually just going to help wealthier students who already go to private schools. We heard from the Texas Federation of Teachers Union. They have this study that says 91% of Texas public school students already go to an underfunded public school. So they worry this bill is only going to slash that public school funding even more. Liz?
All right, Karen Hua, live for us in Texas. Thank you so much, Karen. All right, we're going to take you back to that breaking news. Luigi Mangione pleading not guilty to a federal murder charge in the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Prosecutors formally declaring their intent to seek the death penalty against him. Well, the very latest as we wait for a press conference coming up right here on CBS News 24/7. Local town halls have become big hotspots across the country, with people just packing the events to address lawmakers directly. And some of those town halls have been getting very heated, even leading to protesters being arrested or even thrown out in some cases. Last night, one senator didn't show up to a town hall in Charlotte, North Carolina, but that didn't stop hundreds of voters from coming out. And they had a very unusual solution for a stand-in on stage, a cardboard cutout. Michael Warwick with CBS affiliate WBTV has that story.
To Senator Tillis and Elon Musk, I say hands off our VA.
Pledging to keep it nonpartisan, dozens of Charlotte-based voters stepped up to the microphone to speak directly with their elected North Carolina Senator, Republican Thom Tillis, and not his cardboard cutout.
And it's important for people to feel like they're being heard.
Emotions have been running high at recent Republican town halls, leading to party leadership urging lawmakers to take caution with these in-person events. South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace held one Wednesday on a private gated island.
And I think that Tillis is afraid, but I think he's afraid of the wrong people or person. He shouldn't be afraid of Trump. He needs to be afraid of these people. These are the people that pay attention to his votes.
We need your help. We need you to understand that we can't pull up our bootstraps when we have no boots and now you're taking the straps.
At what organizers called an empty chair town hall, voters expressed a range of concerns, mostly with the ongoing federal job cuts, spearheaded by the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency. Some voters say they'll fear it'll negatively impact education, the environment, and entitlements.
Why do you keep voting for ignorant public health policies?
All right, switching gears today. Check out this shot from Oklahoma where a tornado touched down near the town of Freedom. This is over 150 miles away from Oklahoma City. Whoa. And take a live look from Minneapolis, where it's clear now, but we are tracking a storm threat for the next week or so. Jess, what do we know?
Widespread throughout the Midwest, all the way over into the Mid-Atlantic. We are gearing up for some severe weather around the corner. We head into the afternoon hours today. This also impacts communities like Oklahoma that just dealt with severe weather last night. Tornadic activity was widespread throughout these communities, and we're gearing up for more strong winds, a chance for hail, and a lot of thunderstorms right around the corner as we head into this weekend's forecast. It's going to become a mess a little bit down in the south, too, as that system continues to track off into the east. Taking a look behind me, let's take a look at what we can expect as we head into the next couple hours. Throughout the afternoon hours today into the evening hours tonight, Texas is expecting to see severe weather all throughout the northern portions close to the Oklahoma border. Oklahoma waking up tomorrow morning with widespread storms. This is the one that we're concerned about right now. And as we take a look at our severe weather outlook, this just got updated, actually. We're expecting that extreme risk just in the center portions of the state. Now, we're still gearing up for widespread showers all throughout the south and the northeast, too. And this is important to note for communities all the way over into New Jersey, still dealing with that fire right now. That rain's expected to impact them close to around an inch right around the corners. So that severe storm threat really starts to become widespread across New York all the way over into Texas. We'll have more on that coming up in a bit.
All right, we're also going to be looking forward to the birthday pictures.
Oh, you're sweet. Thanks.
It's our birthday today, everyone.
I appreciate it.
All right, we'll have much more ahead right here on CBS News 24/7. We're waiting to hear from attorneys in New York just moments after Luigi Mangione pleading not guilty to a federal charge in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. We'll have that and much more coming up next with Lindsay Reiser.